for CB. He's a little running a little few minutes late. Minister Sitaraman's meeting is running a little bit over time.
Yes, actually, Ambassador, I'm afraid I was able to simply leave that meeting. Chandrajit unfortunately can't.
Good afternoon, Naushad.
Good afternoon.
Kumar.
Yes, Kumar, hi. Where are you in Hyderabad just now?
Hi, Naushad. Good afternoon.
No, sorry, I didn't hear you. Naushad, you said.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Ambassador Keng Yong.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if you hear me, that's good.
Yes, we're able to hear you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Are we starting?
We're just running a few minutes late. We'll start.
Okay. Yes, Maru.
Just push it.
Yeah. So when mute is pink or red color.
Color is okay.
Yeah.
Ambassador Ankyong, if it's okay, could we go ahead and start? And CB will join us in 15 minutes as soon as he's done with the finance minister. Is that okay?
Yeah. I have no problem.
Very good. So then, so this is not the way this was supposed to begin, but let me start our proceedings off, and then I will turn things over to Ambassador Hong Kim Yong. So I'll start by making my comments first, if that's okay, instead of making them third, as was planned. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on India-Singapore partnership. And this is the first of what we hope will be many sessions. And we're particularly pleased to be having this session this year. This year is the 125th year of CI. We're celebrating our 125th anniversary. And not only that, but we're also celebrating, I think last year, Jayesh, we celebrated our 25th anniversary of having an office in Singapore.
2018. Yeah, last year was 25 years.
2 years ago, we celebrated our 25th anniversary. So we have an old and greatly valued relationship with Singapore. a relationship, of course, between countries, but a relationship in particular between Singapore and Singapore that we are deeply invested in and truly treasure. It's a particular pleasure to be part of this special program with Ambassador Ong Kim Yong. He has been a great champion of India-Singapore relations for many, many years. And as a member of the core group from Seattle that visits Singapore every year, it's a great opportunity always to come there to interact, talk about many issues that are of great importance to us both. I thought I'd make a few comments about where we are broadly, and then some thoughts on the India-Singapore relationship before I turn things over to His Excellency. Where the word that everyone uses to describe where we are is unprecedented. The world has really, and this is a word that is often overused, but it's never been more suited than in the present time. We face an unprecedented health crisis, unprecedented in the scope as it's traveled around the world, unprecedented in the number of people involved, unprecedented, of course, in the direct health effects. And this unprecedented health crisis has prompted a response from governments around the world with lockdowns imposed to try and control the spread of the virus. And these lockdowns have then spawned an unprecedented economic crisis. And many, many countries around the world are looking at substantial drops in GDP this year. I think the latest forecasts for India say that we will drop in GDP this year between -5 and -10%, relative to an expected growth rate of 5 or 6%. So a huge swing if we think of it. And I think the projections for Singapore are similarly severe. The latest estimate that I saw for Singapore was that the latest estimate says that I think Singapore expects its GDP to fall by between -4 and -7% this year. So very dramatic effect on our economies. So we have this unprecedented health crisis, we have an unprecedented economic crisis, and then just as if life wasn't interesting enough, on our northern border for us in India, we also have a security crisis with the current situation that we face with China. And we see then perceived Chinese aggression, not just on our border, but also in the South China Sea, with Taiwan, with Hong Kong. And this all makes the world a very uncertain and difficult place. So we truly are facing very uncertain times and very challenging times. Chandrajit, welcome. Good to see you, and good to see that you were able to escape from the meeting with our finance minister. We decided that I would start so that we could more or less operate on schedule.
Absolutely, yes, please, yeah.
So I'll make a couple of comments about that for us in India, these three things have all come together. The health crisis, the economic slowdown as a result of and drop as a result of the lockdowns, and then the challenge on our northern border. And all of these three things have come together at a time when the Indian economy was slowing even before this. It's good to keep in mind that our fourth quarter of our last financial year, the January to March quarter, was the 7th successive quarterly decline in our growth rate. and came in at just over 3%. So we had a slowing economy even before we came into all these three current challenges that we face. And that background, I think, is important because as we seek to regain momentum, as we seek to regain our economic well-being, it's important to remember that we need to get back to better than we were when we went into our crisis. And I think all of us are convinced that we can recover momentum better and faster working with our friends in Singapore. So as we look at what needs to be done, let me end with a couple of comments about the potential of the India-Singapore relationship. Because as we all learn to live with the virus, not defeat it, but live with the virus, if there's one thing that we can take away, it's that we need to manage our external relations a lot better. We need to manage an interdependent relationship where we're not overly dependent on any one country, where, especially for certain product ranges, we're not excessively dependent on one country. And I think many countries see this as a priority also. And this then creates opportunities for other countries, such as India and Singapore, to take advantage of. So let me make a few comments then on the India-Singapore potential. And I won't repeat that there's great potential. Everyone says that there's great potential. Let me point to three areas of potential. First, as Indian companies seek to recover from the current crisis, we need two new areas of focus. We need to be much more internationally minded, much more export oriented, much more outwardly oriented. And as we seek to be much more international as firms and to take advantage of the export opportunities that are opening up as firms around the world and countries around the world seek to diversify their supply chains, Singapore is a great base for Indian companies to base their international operations. Our own company has chosen to do this. We started off with Singapore being our base for operations in Southeast Asia, and we've now expanded that and said that Singapore should be our base for doing all of our work internationally. Singapore is also a good base for manufacturing. We very often think of Singapore as being a city state, and it is a city state. But Singapore gets a higher proportion of its GDP from manufacturing than we do in India. And Singapore, in that sense, is also a good place to manufacture, particularly the manufacture of more sophisticated goods. And we're exploring as a firm just that opportunity again to see how we can base some of our more value-added manufacturing in Singapore, especially to serve the region. And third is technology and technology focus. Indian firms have been investing more in R&D in recent years, but there's much scope for collaboration with Singapore as we deepen our technology investments. Singapore has great universities and research centers that cover many different fields. We're starting to work with NTU and with two research centers now in Singapore in areas of sensors and chemical analysis. And Singapore also has a vibrant startup environment, again covering many sectors. And the opportunities for these startups to collaborate with Indian firms, and where the startup uses the Indian firm as a way of scaling its own operations, and the Indian firm uses the startup as a source of deep technology and new technology. A last comment, and then I'll stop, which is, this is well beyond my area of expertise, but I'm prompted to I'm prompted to raise the point, given that we have Ambassador Ong Keng Yong with us, and I also see my friend Gautam Mukhopadhyay with us, who is one of our most distinguished former ambassadors, which is, you know, India and Singapore both share an interest in multilateral institutions and share an interest in what we like to, the phrase that we like to use is the rules-based international system. And we often talk of collaboration in wanting to further a rules-based international system. And I would love, as we go through today's program, to hear from our ambassador at large, his thoughts on what steps we could jointly take to further that objective of strengthening a rules-based international system. Because there are things that we can do, but we need to kind of feel our way to do it in a manner that is win-win for all international players. With those initial comments, instead of turning things over to you, Ambassador, let me bring Chandrajit in, and as he was supposed to deliver the original welcome anyway. So thank you, and over to you, Chandrajit.
Thanks, Naushad. Thanks, and what an afternoon to have, and an evening in Singapore to have with Ambassador Ong Keng Yong. I mean, someone who has had such a long and a strong relationship with India, and of course also with CII. Good afternoon, and Naushad, you have already welcomed everybody to the inaugural session, but I would like to only specially welcome you, Naushad, and of course Ambassador Ong to this town hall, as we call it, and which marks the 125th year of CII's work and our existence. And as we commemorate this milestone, we really take this occasion to recognize many who are present here, many friends of India, many friends of CII, who have been very closely associated with this long journey that CII has had with Singapore, and especially Ambassador Ong, who has helped us actually get so well entrenched, if I may say, in Singapore over the last many years. Your inputs, your advice has been of such a great value. The town hall series that we are here in, this is the first of its kind, is really envisaged to take our bonds to the next level through discussions on diverse subjects and areas, including economic or strategic or geopolitical and even cultural issues. And really, this will help us devise, as I believe, a shared agenda to find solutions and partnership that will benefit the region and, of course, the entire world. And the town hall also brings together strong leaders from India and Singapore who have contributed to this relationship over many years, and who will share with us insights as we navigate, especially through these what we have now started calling in CII never normal times. And I'm really honored today that Ambassador Ong Keng Yong, Ambassador at Large, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Executive Deputy Chairman of S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, NTU, is giving this inaugural session of the Town Hall. Ambassador Ong, once again, thank you very much for kicking off this Town Hall series. We have been always getting benefited by your deep insights and your deep thoughts and your guidance. When today we are really meeting on what can be termed as an inflection point in the global affairs, and the COVID-19 pandemic has really led to many global shifts, be it geopolitics, economic development, trade, or the way the world does business. And our meeting on a virtual platform with participants from both countries in itself, a new way of engagement. We never thought that this would be the way we will be engaging. And we also see many phenomenal shifts today in technology. This is one. Global value chains, healthcare, remote delivery of services, and so on and so forth. And the world has really become one more conscious of the imperative for regional and global cooperation on global challenges such as disease and, of course, also things like climate change. And at the same time, we also observe sentiments of nationalism becoming very, very strong. All of these changes may have been underway in pre-COVID days also, but the pandemic has really accelerated them pretty much strongly around the world. And these have deep implications on the relationship between our nations and on economic growth, especially. And with this environment, it is really great to have some of our close friends and these close friendships that stand the test of time, which is really through many a challenges that we have stood. And India and Singapore share a phenomenal friendship, if I can say, with deep bonds cutting across economic as well as cultural areas. And Singapore is India's largest trade partner in the ASEAN region, and today is, of course, as we all know, is India's largest source of foreign direct investment. And it was also one of the first countries with which India signed a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, and following this, bilateral trade had gone up multiple times. And in the financial sector, again, key cooperation was also really developed over many years. Singapore is today the preferred source of external commercial borrowings and foreign portfolio investment. And it is a measure of confidence of Indian industry, if one can say, in Singapore, that more than 80% of our listed offshore bonds by Indian issuers are listed on Singapore Stock Exchange. And equally, Singapore's assets under management at over 100 billion US reflects a strong investors' confidence in India's growth story. Similarly, I would really like to mention about the fintech and the startup, which represents a very strong growing area of our cooperation. We as an institution have been working strongly on that, and India's RuPay international card is well accepted in Singapore, and it is encouraging that the three sandboxes are being set up for fintech startups. And I'm not going into the details of it, something that we have seen happen in the last couple of years. And the close links between our people, and that's a very, very important point, is very well seen in the fact that there are more than 500 flights per week in both directions. Of course, at this point in time, that's also challenged. So. But that's the connectivity, and that's the type of connect that we see between our people to people. And the country has been a keen partner in India's development with close engagement at the G2G level, and that's been a very strong. We can see the warm, strong connect at the G2G level. It has also created a strong agenda of many other areas, like skill development is one of them, with Singapore actually facilitating many of that in India to happen. And with I mentioned about our relationship, CII's relationship with Singapore, and we have built a wide-ranging area of cooperation. And it will really not be out of place for me here to mention today about ESM Gochok Tong's India fever during his CII's visit way back in 1992, which catalyzed our phenomenal journey with Singapore. And he has personally been our mentor and guide, and since then he has helped us in shaping India's economic partnership with Singapore. And he has also given, I must say, which I always say whenever I meet him, that he has also given some very important strategic suggestions and ideas to CII for CII to implement internally, and which we have followed, and which has resulted in a huge gain for us as an institution. And I would really say that it has been a most productive period since the early 90s, and then with very, very cherished friends, well-wishers, much respected advisors, and great partners that we have had from Singapore. We have gone through some real good times, and today I'd like to take this very important occasion, if I can say, to express our very warm and very sincere thanks to all our friends in Singapore who have been in this journey with us. Our annual core group visit from CII, which we go every year to Singapore, is very warmly always welcomed, and we see great insights with the Prime Minister and other government representative ministers. And since 1993, we have held some 26 such missions. And the Singapore India Business Council with the Singapore Business Federation our collaborator on the other side. That meets annually to discuss areas of partnership, collaborations, business collaborations, and ways to strengthen our business links even further. And it's indeed heartening also to note that IBF, the India Business Forum, and I find many of our colleagues from there were present over here. They also raised funds together with matching amount by the Singapore government, and it contributing about 600,000 Singapore dollars to the COVID relief fund for migrant workers. And the way the IBF, as I said, many of their members and leaders present here have got integrated with the Singapore system. It is indeed very heartening. Uh, well, 2020 has changed our lives forever all over the world. We all talk about that, and I'd like to repeat these terms that I have heard a few times to describe the situation. I spoke about never normal, and another thing that we keep saying within CII, which is three terminologies which has come in, which is BC, DC, and AC, which relates to before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, respectively. And as we analyze how our events have been held, the after COVID world is going to be definitely much different from what we have been living today. That is during DC, that's during COVID, and also before COVID. And in a globalized, interconnected world of business and supply chain, COVID-19 situation has been a massive disruptor, and economies across the world are facing huge healthcare challenges, and of course, recessionary conditions. And India and Singapore together can be a very strong stabilizing pole for the region and the world. I feel that strongly, and our abiding friendship can help forge many new initiatives for enabling us all to deal with the situation. And today we heard one very distinguished speaker who in the course of this session will also participate in a Q&A session. But let me end by once again welcoming everyone to this session, and after Ambassador Ong Keng Yong's address, we would get into a lively discussion session. And I would really like to say that Ambassador Ong, over the years, has been one pillar who has helped evolve this bilateral relationship. His understandings of the current state of affairs is indeed phenomenally great, and if I can say, his contribution to our engagement has been just outstanding. It would be wonderful to listen to Ambassador Yong, with whom I have been able to spend some good time in the past, and always understand his deep insights and take lessons from there in seeing to it how we can further this very meaningful win-win relationship between our two countries. So I hand over to Ambassador Yong for his remarks and his address. Ambassador Yong.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. Nice to see you again. And of course, my greeting to all our friends in India, particularly Dr. Naushad. Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me all.
Yes, please. Yes, we can hear you.
Well, as you say, this is unprecedented. I normally don't like to go online and do interaction with our friends across the world, but now that we cannot travel and we cannot do a lot of things, the technology for online interaction seems to be the best option for us. And I must say, every other week, we have a new innovation for this kind of new technology for interaction. So I am quite happy to be here, and I hope that this will be used extensively. This platform will be used extensively for our dialogue and exchanges until such time that physical face-to-face meeting are possible. Yeah. You have, Mr. Banerjee and Dr. Naushad has said all that I wanted to say about our value to each other, India and Singapore. And I must say that the memories of CII interaction with Singaporean leaders and our former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong in particular are always high point in our conversation here in Singapore about our relationship with India. So maybe without repeating what has been said so far, I will just focus on 5 areas, 5 key things that I thought I should put across in my remarks for this interaction on the web. The first thing is that, as Dr. Naushad has elaborated and Mr. Banerjee alluded to, the relationship between India and Singapore and the partnership we have are very deep. Yeah, we have deep foundation, and with this long-standing relationship, we should now try to find ways to take our interaction, our business, our social connectivity to another level. Yeah, we are not new friends. We have been around and working with each other for some time already. So we understand each other more than with many other people, other countries around us. So how do we go forward? Yeah, I thought I should focus on innovation, which both Dr. Naushad and Mr. Banerjee have really touched on. In Singapore, we have this thing called the Global Innovation Alliance, which we work quite actively with many of our friends in India, basically to bring about new startups and work on new ideas for mutual benefit. So it is important to keep moving on this. Yeah. Secondly, both of you have also touched on the digitalization that is now happening in India and in Singapore, as well as the ASEAN region surrounding Singapore. And I see digital economy as the bright spot for our 2 sides to continue working. We have touched on the fintech. We have a lot of other things with regard to how do we automate the business transaction and how we can help various sectors associated with all these traditional business to digitize. And all these are important because if we do not capitalize on all these advantages which the new technology, the innovation have brought, then we are going to be behind many of our competitors. So given the long-standing relationship between India and Singapore and the understanding we have, we can actually quickly move on to the next level of our bilateral ties, bilateral business and economic relationship. So we move to digitalize, we move to automate it. Yeah, but at the same time, trade is our lifeline in Singapore, and of course for India, this is also very important. So we have to be managing this transition. Yeah, how do we transform ourselves from the old format to the new format? So this is where I feel there is a lot of opportunity for all of us in India, in Singapore, in the ASEAN region, to find convergence, to cooperate, to do joint ventures. Yeah. So the third thing I wish to touch on is really that while we talk about all these modern things, digitalizations and automation, innovation, the fact remains many of our society, many parts of our society, many parts of our businesses are still stuck in the old format. So we cannot forget how to take them out of that traditional arrangement. We have to bring them along, and this is where politics come into play. Many of these people are an important part of the electorate, and we appreciate issues that you come across in India, being the largest democracy in the world today. Yeah. So we feel that we can find a way to bring the traditional sectors along. Like we say here in ASEAN, we put them all in a bus. Yeah, we have all kind of passenger in the bus, but we should all try to stay on the bus and move along. So we now have to find a way to add new value to what we already have. Our CICA, our ASEAN-India Free Trade Agreement, our WTO commitment, and so on and so forth. But the important thing is that as we do so, we also find ways where we can overcome the differences, because if you are just going to let the future be determined by what has happened so far, then there is no future. We have to try to, put it bluntly, bury the past to move on to the new modern age, which is full of digital equipment, digital life form, and so on and so forth. The fourth point that I thought Dr. Naushad posed in his question is very germane, because my fourth point is, how do we work with the rules-based order, the existing form of legal framework, agreement and international convention, and all the consensus that the global parties have reached in the past. Here, I think I bring to this particular afternoon the idea that we should think more about how India and Singapore should develop and strengthen what we call the digital economy agreement, the digital economy agreement. We have this DEA now with some countries, Singapore and New Zealand, Singapore and Chile, and all these small, vibrant economy in the Indo-Pacific. But I think we can do more. And if you have the Indian participation, the momentum will be much more significant and even faster than many others in the more developed economy in the West. And the last point is really that, I think as we go forward, India has two great advantages. We don't see enough, to put it bluntly, exploitation of these two advantages. Yeah. Today, the big powers of the world is not really the one that have the military might or the economic influence and so on and so forth. But what is important are two things, two characteristics. One, the consumption power. So India is a huge potential. The consumption power of your consumer is actually your greatest trump card, to put it this way. Yeah. And the second thing is your demography. You are a huge market, and with the kind of demographic factors, characteristics you have, you can do a lot more than what has been done so far. So how do we leverage the consumption power of the Indian population and the huge demographic character you have in India? I hope that in the coming months and years, we can think a bit more about these two specific advantages. China has exploited clearly these two advantages to their most advantaged position. Consumption power of the Chinese consumer and the demography of China. So those are the 5 points I put forward to this brief segment. I hope that I deliberately don't want to go into depth with many of these so that we can elicit more comments and questions as we go on during this exchange. Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee, Mr. Banerjee and Dr. Naushad.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rong, for those lovely remarks. I've noted 5 very critical points coming out. I'll try and reserve my points as a moderator to almost zero because there is some 140 plus people who are attending this meeting, and I'm sure many of them would like to ask you a question, Ambassador, or I will look forward to your comments, Ambassador, as also Naushad Forbes, Dr. Forbes's inputs. So I'll leave the floor, get onto the floor to get our members who have joined to ask questions. But I cannot resist ask 2 quick questions to both of you. And to this question goes to both you, Ambassador, and to you, Naushad. One question I'd like to which I find to be something which, whenever I talk to Singapore, whenever I am working with Singapore, which comes to my mind very strongly, and I see this to be the next level of our interaction. And as India and Singapore have not concentrated much on soft diplomacy, that means arts and culture, would this be the right time to look at an extensive partnership on these areas of arts and culture for the new connected world? And I think that's something that we need to deeply engage. And I don't see that being on our banner sort of discussion point at all so far to a great extent. Second, I also wanted to ask both of you, as I was noting both your speeches, what, according to both, would be the new normal, or as I was saying, a never normal? What are some of the challenges we could face as we race towards finding a vaccine, say, for instance, and going back to the old system? So, shall we slip back? And what are the new alternatives you foresee? And what can India and Singapore do together as we navigate this crisis? And how do we come out stronger? Make this entire, as it's cliched, but is it how do we see these challenges as our opportunities? So I'll leave these 2 questions there to both our guests today to answer. Whoever would like to go first, Ambassador or Naushad?
Okay,
Ambassador.
I would try to have a quick take on this question. Yes, I think that we have to look at the new normal. Actually, my usage is that when we talk about new normal, it is not quite correct. There's no normal, there's no new. As Dr. Naushad put it, it is unprecedented. There's no no reference point in the past. So it's a new transformation, new transform situation, transform global situation. Yeah. But I think that the important thing is that we need to stress 2 things. Yeah. Whatever happened, whether new normal or a transformed global situation, we have to rely on multilateral cooperation. Yeah. As you can see, the virus has no respect for any boundaries or any predetermined geography. Yeah. And in our development of the vaccine, we cannot allow vaccine nationalism, as I call it, to take precedence over vaccine multilateralism. So my Prime Minister here is very active about stressing this multilateral cooperation in the development of vaccine. And if you look at the development of vaccine, you cannot just rely on one particular country or one particular civilization, to put it bluntly. Yeah, India has so many parts of the things needed to put the vaccine together. You are one of the major producers of vaccine for all kinds of communicable diseases in the world, right? So, in the case of other countries, they make certain things for the vaccine, the container, the syringe, the other medical equipment. So it is important for us to stress this repeatedly. And at the WHO, they have focused on how to get this multilateral cooperation in a dynamic format. So they have things like COVAX, COVAX, yeah, they have things like ACT Accelerator Program, yeah, and then they are working closely with Gavi, they are working closely with all the other possible group of scientists and pharmaceutical companies. The important thing is that when something can be latched on, it should be shared. And the question is, how do we plan for that eventuality? How do we distribute this as much as possible, as quickly as possible, all around the world? Because the virus is all around the world. So that is something that we need to bear in mind. The other important thing is really that there are so many scientific analysis and we have certain basic protocols to help us control the spread of infection. Yeah, and we should not allow the geopolitical interests and all these politicized statements to minimize the important thing of science and the cooperation at the social level. Yeah, society in many countries are now divided because one side say yes, we wear masks. The other side say no, no need to wear masks. Yeah, and so on and so forth. So actually, this is no good for our international global village. At the end of the day, we will have a lot of problem because the next thing that we do in Singapore and in ASEAN is how do we activate our tourism and travel business. Yeah, and if we continue to rely on political or other kind of non-scientific reasons, we will not be able to establish the green lane to facilitate tourism or to facilitate the return of business at the grassroots level, at the more upper middle class level, and so on. So these are things that I think we should seriously think about and don't let all these what I call extraneous consideration come into a quick and clinical approach to dealing with vaccine, to dealing with all these protocol to restrict our spread of the to restrict the spread of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Rashad?
So let me try and address the arts and culture question first, Chandradeep, that you asked, and then comment about new normal, picking up on where Ambassador Hong Keng Yong left off. On the arts and culture point, you know, it seems to me that arts and culture will follow young people. So to the extent that we can foster greater exchange and understanding among younger people, I think the collaboration in arts and culture would follow. So I'm sort of struck by one of my favorite examples of social engineering. Actually, many of my favorite examples of social engineering come from Singapore. And one of my favorite examples was when a few years back, Singapore decided that it didn't have a nightlife. So it needed to create a nightlife. And so it set out to develop the Boat Quay and Clark Quay areas as nightlife areas, because there were these nice old buildings that could be developed and so on. And the amazing thing is, it worked. And in an amazingly short time, I think in 2 years or 3 years, Singapore went from having actually no nightlife to having a very vibrant nightlife centered around that area. And it's now become an area which is also a center for the arts. It's a center for a lot of entertainment. And it was a very deliberate government-led effort that had great results. In India, we work very differently. In India, I mean, how do I put it politely? I think if the government tries to foster arts and culture, you know, everything could be there except an audience. You know, you just, because you end up with something that is really in too many, I think, cases. So you end up instead relying on private initiative, and you end up relying on the vibrancy of how Indians like to interact and play and so on, that drives the whole arts and culture scene forward. And I wonder how we put these together somehow. But I think the only thing that I would suggest is if we can ensure greater exchange of young people, you know, more young Indians going to Singapore and spending time there, whether it's to study or whether it's to visit, and more young Singaporeans coming to India. And I think that brings us back to the old program that we've talked of in the past of having a program of internships for Singaporean students to come and spend time working with companies in India as a way of getting comfortable with the Indian culture and with the opportunities that exist in India, because I think then the arts and culture will follow. Just a quick comment on the new normal. You know, I was just thinking about the point that was being made by Ambassador on the vaccine. You know, if you want international coordination, the way the world used to get international coordination in an area like this is that you look to the US to take the lead. The US would get countries together, and countries would come up with some international protocols that most leading countries would follow, and things would generally fall in line. In the absence of that US leadership, which is the world that we're living in just now, in the absence of that US leadership, we need an alternative. And I wonder if a useful alternative would be for, say, if India and Singapore are like minded about something, and we say we both believe in a rules based international system, can we agree on some of those rules that should apply to the distribution, production, and use of vaccines? It's a very real issue today. And can we say that, listen, we would encourage as many other countries as wish to be a part of the system to subscribe to those rules as well? And so we can make a start and simply say, here are a set of rules that we're going to voluntarily sign up for. And we encourage other countries to equally voluntarily sign up to those same rules. And if we can get enough countries, I think, involved in this process, we can maybe make up for that missing international coordination that we see in the world today.
Good. Thanks, Naushad. So I'll really now go to our participants, very, very distinguished participants on both. I can see people from India as well as from Singapore. And let me bring them in for quick questions or quick comments. I would ask first 3 people to comment, and then I'll turn over to our distinguished speakers. And maybe first, as was referred to, someone who has had who has again seen 2 countries from both sides and very, very deeply, and the region, and very, very knowledgeable on the region, like he is knowledgeable on other regions too. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, sorry, that was a giveaway that I had to come to you first.
Thank you very much, CB. Firstly, let me say that this has been a very stimulating, very insightful, and even a thought-provoking discussion between Dr. Forbes and Ambassador Ong Keng Yong. I'm really grateful to CII for organizing this. You know, a number of issues were raised, and it's quite interesting to comment on 3 or 4 of them, but I'll just limit myself to 2. Firstly, you know, I think the observation that you started with about the strategic nature of our relations, and particularly the reference to former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong. You know, I still remember his resounding sort of imagery of Asia as a plane with 2 wings, India and China. And it's possible that, you know, the plane is not flying in absolutely balanced wings, and we need to strengthen one wing further. And I think that's where, you know, Singapore is truly, the word strategic is bandied about a lot, but Singapore is and remains a truly strategic partner, and we discussed many ways in which that strategic relationship can be developed further. Secondly, I think Dr. Forbes had raised this point about multilateral institutions. And I think also Ambassador Ong Keng Yong had referred to it in terms of multilateralism, particularly in the context of health. So it's really true. We are witnessing a situation where the UN was completely outside the picture. The WTO seems to be in neglect or crisis. The WHO is in controversy. And global politics is not necessarily very orderly. It's highly competitive and contentious. So how do we create a kind of new multilateralism in such a context? And, people are coming up with ideas like the Quad, and perhaps even ASEAN and the East Asia Summit may feel the cold chill of the trade wars as well as the rivalry between China and India. So one possible idea, and I just want to throw this up, is, as Dr. Forbes suggested, a kind of partnership between India and Singapore on the health-related area, perhaps on vaccines. And one possible pressure point that we can use, you have businesses in India, like the Serum Institute and formerly CIPLA in the context of AIDS, which tried to democratize medicines and treatments so that they were much more accessible to those who most needed them worldwide. Then we have the expert community worldwide today that desperately needs to cooperate with each other on scientific research, on testing, on experiences of different vaccines in different parts of the world. Can India and Singapore think of a platform in which we can bring the scientists and the business people who are interested into a platform that can act as a pressure point, that can counteract actually many of the negative dimensions that we see in this area? And I think, the underlying all this, and in terms of a new kind of approach to the future, new normal, no normal, whatever it is that somewhere as we transition to a new economy, maybe a more digital technology-based economy, we cannot forget, I think one point that Ambassador Ong Keng Yong referred to is that there is a part of the world that is still in the old economy. We cannot forget that part of the world, as well as the fact that, we have to bring in this relationship between sustained environment, climate change, man-nature relationships, which may be one of the causes behind pandemics, and this whole issue of sustainability. In a way, sustainability now has a new meaning in a post-pandemic age, where it's not just the relationship between man and nature as an environment, but man and nature as a natural environment that we need to flag. So, I just wanted to add these to the discussion, really in response to, I think, questions that came from the discussion itself. But there are several other points on which we could comment, this whole issue of self-reliance. Self-reliance, for example, agreed that we need to look outward, export-oriented, global, etc., etc. In many ways, self-reliance in certain areas like health, food security, maybe technology security, is also required. And self-reliance does not necessarily mean protectionism. And self-reliance can also mean choosing your partners, and which is where, of course, Singapore becomes particularly important. I think somebody referred to the fact that you don't want to be dependent on any single one country or single one industry. I think these are some of the areas that we could look at. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador, for some very wide-ranging perspective on that on those issues. But I would not like to go to the two speakers just now. I'll take one comment from the Singapore side, and someone who has been also involved in a leadership role, really taking Indian businesses getting deeply entrenched. Quite a couple of them are there. Quite a few of them are there from the Singapore side. But Mr. K.V. Rao, the resident director of Tata Sons in the ASEAN, and also, of course, he has been the chair of the IBF, the India Business Forum, and again has been who's somebody who can comment on some of the issues that were raised by Ambassador Mukhopadhyay, but also maybe you can add something on your own in case you would like to ask a question to these two eminent speakers of ours today.
Thank you, CP. Well, I'd just like to say that Singapore has just come out of an election And there is a new reality that is dawning on Singapore too in terms of its future. And the new reality post-COVID world, we are still coming to terms because we really do not know what it is. So I think it's a good time for us to sort of reset, review, and focus on areas which bring greater authenticity and give us greater future. As Ambassador Gautam mentioned about health and biotechnology and medicines and vaccines, I think it's very important to sharp focus and perhaps look at a different way of doing business, because the new reality that will hit us is wherever India has gone into doing business, whether it is in the US or in Singapore, we have a very strong core of services sector. And the services sector has a large dimension of manpower and technical skills being exported out of India, which has traditionally taken us where we have been in the last about 3 decades. But I think with the new reality of protecting jobs and a new nationalism that is coming in, not just in Singapore, but everywhere around the world. In Singapore, though it's a very small nation in terms of people and skills, has taken a certain center stage in terms of debate. And I think we need to warm up to the new reality as a friend that Singapore also has, and look at that dimension in a way where our focus is more on technology transfers, on creating new intellectual properties, on creating trademarks, patents, and so on and so forth. I mean, just would like to give one small example to what Ambassador Gautam mentioned. There are 14 companies in Singapore from the Health Sciences Authority, which have been approved by the government here after a lot of testing for the testing kits. If they have to go global scale, there is no other place in the world today other than India to upscale it very quickly into scale business at low cost points for the world, which is democratize the entire care part. So there are a huge amount of opportunities there. I would very much want the panelists to comment how we can sharp focus by creating a team of experts on both sides who can very closely work so that some of these are not just thoughts, but they can be actioned upon very, very quickly, which will have an impact in the post-COVID world. This is one area. The other area that a good point that CV brought touches my heart on arts. Well, I do wear one of my hats is to chair the Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society, which is a 71-year-old organization here, which has 2,200 people who come to learn Indian classical music, dance, and arts. And I have some people here who are on my committee who are also here. It's music to our ears. We conduct 200 concerts of Indian classical nature in Singapore, semi-classical and all. It's got a huge amount of patronage here, not just among Singaporeans, but I mean Indian Singaporeans, but also the Chinese, also the expatriates and all. I think it's a great avenue that's been mentioned. I was talking to our ambassador from Singapore and India, as well as our new ambassador has been pointed, that we must activate the diplomatic track on the cultural exchanges a lot more than what we have. I think there's a great potential there. And ultimately, it's movement to arts that brings, reduces anxiety and brings peace to the people in a world that is full of it with this COVID that's hitting all our people. So I suppose these are the two comments I'd like to make. And I think it would be helpful to really sharp focus and deep dive in a few selected areas, which will really bear fruit in the next 1-2 years' time in terms of the relationship. A nice comment that was made is in a world which is neither unipolar nor bipolar, nor it has any sort of polarity or leadership, it's very good to have friends who think alike of multilateralism. And I think on a greater world stage, Singapore, India can make a very positive statement on restoring multilateralism and perhaps helping to bring a better global trading order, which I do not know when it will take birth. But I think crises make sometimes historically the best outcomes. So I would be optimistic that we may have something good out there. And there has to be a lot of collaboration on the thinking process. And both sides, Singapore and India, can and really rewire Asian relationships. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll quickly turn over to Ambassador Ong Keng Yong as well as Naushad for their comments and response on some very, very interesting issues raised by both Ambassador Gautam and KV Rao. Ambassador Yong?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rao and Ambassador Gautam for that intervention. I have always supported the arts and cultural part of our diplomacy with any country. And Mr. Rao has been here in Singapore for many years, and as he said, he is a very active member of the community here in supporting the Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society. At the same time, we also have to find a way to make it sustainable. Yeah, and sometimes when we deal with cultural and what I call the more intangible links between our two countries, they come in what I call spasmodic bursts. And this is something not good for all those artists and cultural friends, because they work on it 365 days a year, and when there is a sudden surge of interest, it was just a momentarily kind of situation. So we need to find a way to put all these arts and cultural cooperation on a more sustainable basis. Yeah, and I think someone made the point just now that the younger generation and the ability to use technology allow the artists and the cultural talents to do more. And this is where I think we should help to try to bring more of this technology into the arts and cultural segment of our society to get a greater outreach. And more importantly, in our multiracial and multi-religious Singapore, I found in the last 6 months, when we have to stay home more often, many of my friends and colleagues appreciate Indian cultural and artistic talents even more, because they were able to access things on the various chat groups, the various interactive platform. So I think there is a lot more we can do. My brother is active in theatre in Singapore, and they are now relying more and more on all these wonderful technology to decorate the stage, to cut down the cost of staging events. Because if you go by the old format, you basically got to spend a lot of money doing the back job, doing the stage setup, and so on and so forth. Now we can have a wonderful performance using technology and lightings. So I think we can, going forward, help to bring more of this new technical innovation into the arts and cultural scene. Of course, the artists and the cultural talents will continue to do what they have been taught, and we must not adulterate all their traditions. The other angle is that I think we have to accept that politics will always come in the way of whatever we wish to do in moving our relations in the healthcare cooperative arena. Over here in ASEAN discussion, we always have this issue of, some member states of ASEAN wanting to have some of the actions or some of the benefits of doing public health cooperation. Yeah. So we hope that going forward in collaborating between ASEAN and ASEAN dialogue partner like India, we will not be too inundated with all these who should come first and who should gain most. The idea must be to promote mutually rewarding kind of initiatives, and we should continue with our various persuasive narratives, and the effort must be made to explain that everybody should have a part of the action, and we don't have to say that everything goes to one particular country or goes to a particular sector. Yeah, this is the public diplomacy and the bilateral or multilateral diplomatic work that we're going to do. Thank you.
Naushad?
So
Yeah.
just picking up on a point that Gautam made actually about our current policy in India of self-reliance, and our government has been very clear in emphasizing that this self-reliance program is not intended as an inward-looking program. It's actually intended as a program that is meant to build greater depth of manufacturing, particularly manufacturing strength in the country, but that those strengths should then be outward-looking strengths, strengths that should be seen in trade and in greater participation in global value chains. And I think all of us should really, I think, as industry, help the government achieve that outward-looking objective of the self-reliance program. And I would encourage Singapore to help the Indian government achieve it too, in the sense that we many of us were disappointed when we pulled out of the RCEP negotiations last year. And given the current circumstances and the friction with China, it's very unlikely that anything will move in participating in RCEP, where China plays such a major role anytime soon. But that doesn't say that we can't go much further in our bilateral trade agreements that we have, particularly in Southeast Asia. And can we actually take advantage of very complementary economies between Singapore and India to greatly deepen our existing trade agreement? We have not only very complementary economies. I think the only concern on the India side is rules of origin. And as long as we can have good, clear norms for rules of origin, we could probably go much further in the free movement of goods and services than we now have. So I think there are opportunities to go further and faster on the trade side that could greatly diversify both Singapore's reliance on China and India's reliance on China as a source of imports to a much wider set of partners.
I'd really like to bring in two individuals again from two sides of the ocean. One is Manoj Kohli from here in India. He represents SoftBank. He heads the SoftBank here. And I go back to Singapore and bring in maybe Vijay Iyengar. I think he has he also represents a wide range of issues, wide range of subjects that I'd like to bring the two of them in at this point in time before I move on again to the other participants. So Manoj, maybe, yeah.
Thank you, CV. Thank you to Ambassador Ong Keng Yong and my friend KV Rao, as well as Naushad. You've given a great start. I am a very old supporter of this traditionally very strong partnership of India and Singapore. But I believe that the best is yet to come. I believe we can take this partnership to the next level because India is going towards a 5 trillion economy. We have a median age of 27, 650 million mobile internet users, and huge consumption power. That is what Ambassador Ong Keng Yong said. Huge consumption power. Domestic consumption is growing very well. Of course, pandemic has been not good for all of us, but still domestic. August itself is growing very well, and I'm sure by December, Indian economy will be back on rails. So I've had a great experience of Singapore hospitality and investment during my Airtel days. As you know, Airtel was the biggest Singapore investment in India and most successful investment in India. And it was showcase of how Singapore investments in India will be nurtured. And this partnership we have to strengthen after the pandemic. I think, strategic area which India offers, I don't think any other country can offer. And I agree with Naushad that self-reliance program of India will not be in isolation or anything. It will be still be globalized India, but with great focus on domestic consumption, so that domestic consumption can be produced and manufactured within the country. So there are 5-6 areas, Ambassador Ong, which we can focus on from Singapore point of view, and we'll be delighted in CII India to support you and help you and guide you. Manufacturing, of course, is the top priority, and India wants to really build that manufacturing base for its own 1.3 billion population, which is consumption is growing very well. Second is infrastructure. Now, infrastructure includes ports, airports, roads, energy, and many other sectors where India government has announced a $1.4 trillion investment plan for next 5-6 years. And this is one area which will be the biggest infrastructural opportunity in the world. Third area is, of course, energy, including renewable energy. Fourth area, education, which Singapore is good at. And I think now recently national education policy has been released by India. So inviting international schools and universities. And finally, healthcare. Healthcare, of course, now with 60% of global vaccines being produced in India, this is the time to build up on healthcare partnership. And last but not the least, the digital area where I'm personally supporting 25 SoftBank portfolio companies, where digital startups are disrupting all established industries and really taking up entrepreneurship to a new height, innovation to a new height, where Singapore and India can really work shoulder to shoulder. So I feel a new era will start. I'd like to request Ambassador Ong to share his thoughts, because this era will be far bigger and maybe brighter than the last era. Thank you.
Thanks. May I request Mr. Vijay Iyengar to go ahead, please? I can't quite. Yeah, you're there. Yeah.
Chandrajit, I can see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to say a few words here. I have one comment and a question for the panel. First of all, let me.
Sorry, we seem to have lost him. Maybe we will focus on both our speakers. I'll come back to them right now, and maybe whenever we get him back, we will get him to make a comment. Can I come to Naushad and then again to Ambassador Yong, please? Yeah, Naushad. Respond on what Manoj was talking about. I think you had covered quite a bit of his points, but in a quick response to him.
Well, just to say that I think he's exactly right, that the opportunities to do a lot more, and particularly to do a lot more in the area of infrastructure is very great. We've seen significant participation by Singapore's two big wealth funds in infrastructure projects in India, and we've seen participation by two of Singapore's leading infrastructure companies, one of which is the sponsor for today's program, also participating in infrastructure projects. And I think we've had good interaction with both these companies and with the wealth funds on our core group visits to Singapore, and I think we should just. They're very active. I think we need to see how we can go beyond. I think we need to see how we can get the other infrastructure companies, the other real estate companies in Singapore to also play a bigger role in the infrastructure projects in India. There are opportunities in many sectors, as Bharat said. I think there are opportunities in transport infrastructure, opportunities in port infrastructure, opportunities in a whole variety of different areas.
Ambassador Yong?
Yeah, I agree. I think that infrastructure in India, you will always have a need for more investments and more development. Even when you can say that some aspect of the infrastructure development has been completed, you will have to upgrade after X number of years. So infrastructure is always a good sector to go in. But then to be in infrastructure, you really have to work with a good partner from India, because for outsider coming into India to go into infrastructure, you will always be confronted with a myriad of issues, and it will be always good to have good partners to work with infrastructure. Just now, Manoj talked about manufacturing, energy, education, healthcare. Yeah, these are the kind of things that should attract more companies from Singapore, where we have many joint venture between Singapore and non-Singaporean companies, and they come to Asia, locate themselves in Singapore to reach out to the Asian countries, the Asian economy, to do business, to do more joint venture or whatever. So I think if the Indian partners can help, CII, for example, can help to direct some of this, there will be significant interest. As I mentioned just now, India's consumption power is now, I think, number two, if not positioning itself going for the number one, because you are a democracy, you are open to many more opportunities and access to other information about new products and whatnot. So these are the areas where we can do more. But I have always advised our Singapore company, they must do their homework. They cannot just say India has more than 1.4 billion people and we can go and just open a shop and make money. There's no such a thing. They have to prepare themselves, do their homework, get the right partners, and do the necessary preparation. There are various stages to get into the Indian business, and I think more and more of our companies should be more and more educated about how to operate in India. In the healthcare sector, you have many different situations in different states. In my other job at the Singapore International Foundation, we work with Karnataka and Tamil Nadu on simple volunteer program looking after maternal health care. And actually, as we do so, we find that there are many hospitals which are owned by private companies and other Indian companies which supply various medical equipment and medication to the hospitals. They have a lot of opportunities to do more. And these are the areas that we need to highlight across to the traditional sector of our respective economy. SME, traditional business, still have a big role to play. Yeah, we need to modernize them through digitalization, but at the same time, the interaction on the ground, these are important, and we must try to facilitate whatever is necessary to get both sides to come together more often and actually to work together in joint venture. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to bring in some perspectives from the financial side, from the financial sector side, people who have been especially bringing that perspective, because that's a very key area of our relationship. I really want to bring that. And also the legal perspective. And that's again, when we see from the legal lens, things look pretty different. So I'd like to bring in some experts on that. And of course, a very strong institution which has really brought in a lot of depth in our relationship. So I will request Manohar Kaitani from Singapore. Shardul Shroff Shardul is present here. Vishal also brings with him the youth perspective. Vishal, if I may. And everyone agrees, as you see, the youth perspective from your side, because that's also very critical. And if the time permits, I will also bring in Amit Sinha from the DBS Bank, who brings in this entire perspective of. So I'll go in that order, and I'll first go to Manohar Kaitani from the EDV.
Hi, Chandra. Thank you very much. I'm wearing two hats, Capital Land, which is the company that I work for, and then, of course, as special advisor to EDB. I think a lot of very good comments have been made, and I want to laud this initiative by CII to create this forum. I think the distinguished speakers have all made very relevant comments. I just want to touch on 2 points. One is Singaporeans investing in India. So Capital Land is one of the biggest Singapore investors in India. And we totally believe in the future of India. And who was it? I think Manoj was the one who said that the best is yet to be. Totally agree with it, because there are so many unexploited opportunities in India. So the segment that we are in, business, IT parks, and logistics, we see tremendous growth potential. I think the combination of quality of manpower, quantity of manpower, talent, and cost of talent, I think is unparalleled for this sector. So we have stated publicly that we want to double our investments in India from the current 3.3 billion within the next 5 years. I think given COVID, there's a possibility that there will be a delay in when we reach that target, although I hope it's not the case. But definitely there will be no derailment, because very clearly we see India, in fact, benefiting tremendously from this accelerated digitalization revolution. Okay, and as I said, logistics is the other area. So we remain committed, and we always tell Singapore companies that doing business in India is not difficult, but it is not impossible either. So you have to plan well, you have to have patience, but you can make it if you have the right partners and the right approach. Conversely, looking at the other direction, I think everybody has talked about the opportunities, and I think it is well accepted by many Indian companies that Singapore is a good place to do trade, services, finance. But what is less well known is the opportunity to do R&D and manufacturing. And I'm very glad that my good friend Naushad highlighted this as an opportunity, because it's perhaps one of the best kept secrets. And I think the opportunity now is particularly good because digitalization, Industry 4.0 has given Indian companies the opportunity to leapfrog the manufacturing revolution, right? Just like the mobile phone enabled Indian companies or Indians to, leapfrog the wired phone, phase. Because India is so well positioned to incorporate digitalization in conventional manufacturing. And I think that is where Singapore has invested a lot in, because of our size. We are so compact, right? So we have invested a lot in R&D to promote high-end manufacturing, given our strengths in that area and constraints in labor-intensive manufacturing. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for Indian companies to draw on the R&D infrastructure that we have in Singapore, and which is easy to access because of our compactness, to enable them to carry out high-end manufacturing in a more accelerated manner. So as a case in point, we have created this unique manufacturing index, which I think no other country has done. It's called SIRI, right? which does an audit of how companies are manufacturing and how they can upgrade themselves. So I wanted to highlight this as one unique opportunity that may not be obvious, but which I think affords tremendous opportunity. And because of COVID and the contestation between the US and China, the China plus one has become a reality, right? So many companies are looking for alternate supply chain options, including manufacturing options. And I think that is where, if we do it well, some of these activities can be done in Southeast Asia and some can be done in India. So we also have an industrial park in India. In fact, we see lots of interest, even from North Asian companies who want to establish manufacturing bases in India. So I wanted to highlight these as some of the opportunities which, both our friends from Singapore and India may want to look at more closely in the exciting post-COVID or, with COVID era. Thank you very much.
Right. As we have actually really running out of time, I'll request Shardul, if he is there, to make a quick comment, and thereafter I'll come to Vishal and Amit. Shardul?
Thank you, CB, and grateful to the ambassador and Naushad for this opportunity. One of the issues that I wanted to talk in the context of finance is the gift city, in which I think Singapore has already participated in the sense of cooperation agreements, and the extent of larger involvement is just well nigh, for the simple reason that the technology, whether for a bullion exchange or technology in terms of an arbitration center, as an arbitration court, as an international court, all these are under consideration of the government of India. And this is an aspect where both law and finance and business will be of great combination, and one must look at this. So SIAC does have a cooperation agreement with the gift city, but lot more needs to be done, because it's not just the procedural cooperation which is important, it's the intellectual participation and actually upgradation of skills which are important in terms of knowing about the technology, setting the rules of the game, and really taking advantage of the cooperation that we have between India and Singapore. So I think this is an area, plus reciprocity. I think one of the issues that we have in terms of recognition of judgments and processes of that nature requires a reciprocity agreement between the countries. And both these issues are very critical in terms of really setting up a very large industrial platform as also a business platform, because if we do not treat each other as reciprocating territories for judgments and decrees, it will be a serious problem in our trade. We have arbitration recognition because of the New York Convention, but we have no reciprocal treaty in relation to courts and judgments of courts from India to Singapore and vice versa. So these 2-point issues, as I mentioned, are critical, and one must take these forward very, very fast on an expedited track if we are really to help big trade to take place between Singapore and India.
Thanks, Shardul. Vishal?
Thank you, CB. Thank you, Ambassador Ong. Thank you, Naushad, for your interesting insights and comments. I represent the financial services part of CII. And I think Singapore and India have very close ties in the financial services space. In fact, we do a lot of work with the sovereign wealth funds of Singapore and other Singapore asset management companies. And it's been a pleasure. And even our investments all over the world are all rooted and all housed in Singapore. And it's been a pleasure over the last 10 years working with Singapore. I had one question specifically. Some of Singapore's traditional competitors in the financial services space have been cities like Hong Kong, to a certain extent, Tokyo, and the city of London. And at least Hong Kong and the city of London are currently facing some uncertainties about their future as global financial centers. So, in that context, how is Singapore positioned itself to cater specifically to financial services firms and their growth, as well as seeking talent to establish a much larger base for financial services in the region? Thank you.
Vishal. Thanks, Vishal. I'll move to Amit Sinha of the DBS Bank.
Thank you, CB. I have just one quick question. I mean, we're currently in a situation where I think in the early part of March, a lot of supply chain got disrupted because of the issue in China. We're seeing US-China trade war. And what I'm observing, wearing both tech hat as well as India hat, a lot of companies globally are looking at diversification of supply chain. I mean, increasingly term call is China plus one or a more flexible supply chain. I guess question at both sides to Ambassador Ong as well as Dr. Naushad is how is Singapore working towards bringing global company to bring Singapore as a regional headquarter for alternate supply chain in Southeast Asia and India? And then question for Dr. Forbes is how is India positioning themselves to capture some of these opportunities? Because I do see some companies putting up alternate facilities in India, but key challenge which I hear always is you can't create huge capacity in India compared to what you can create in even Southeast Asia or China. So what more could be done to create that alternate capacity? And again, Singapore is an ideal place to be created as a regional head office and move to India. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. So we have really overshot time. So I was trying to manage time by just moving from one speaker to the other, from one intervention to the other. So now I'll go in the order of Ambassador Ong for his responses and for some closing comments, and I'd like Naushad thereafter to really close it with final remarks. So Ambassador Ong, please.
Okay, thank you. I will go by reverse order quickly to respond to some of the questions asked. How to bring more global companies to Singapore? I think we are working on refreshing our strategy, especially since the COVID-19 has been a big disruptor. The good thing is that as far as India and Singapore are concerned, we have various working groups working in different parts of the economy and the financial sector. So I think there are various plans to now update all this strategy to keep this global company in Singapore and to get more of them to continue to come to Singapore. The thing about the three big competitors, Hong Kong, Tokyo, London, yeah, a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, actually, for most of the friends in these relevant sector, they told me that the more we have such kind of competition, the better it is for Singapore, and we will try to position ourselves, especially with regard to our predictability and our regulations. But what is important now is that I see more and more fintech initiatives, because I think it is unavoidable. We have to go this route, more technology, more ability to take advantage of the technological development. But in this respect, also with reference to what Dr. Naushad mentioned earlier, we also have to think about data protection and all the other related legal concerns. So as we go ahead, we will try to again update or refresh our existing provision, especially with regard to the legality aspect. But we are definitely trying to find a way to be a bit more of a integrator, integrating the smaller companies, the more traditionally formatted business enterprises with the new fintech environment. So these are things that ongoing. They're trying to find out how we can do more. On the legal part, yes, reciprocity is needed. I think we need to find a way to create the necessary environment to settle this ASAP. So overall, Chandrajit, I think there are many things that we need to do. And what has happened, as I see it, is that this COVID-19 pandemic has allowed many of these dilly-dallying, as I call it, to be now put aside because we have to make decisions quickly. Otherwise, we might lose out to other competitors, or we might have other consequences. So the good thing now is that, as someone said just now, the Singapore general election is over. The parliament had just been formally inaugurated. The new parliament had just been formally inaugurated last night. And going forward, we are expecting many new ideas to come out from these new government, new parliamentarians. Hopefully, it will strengthen our Singapore-India relationship and look into all these areas that our many friends have raised. And I hope that this will really enhance the value of Singapore to India and also the value of India to Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, and Naushad, for your comments.
I'll try to be very brief, Chandrajit, because I know we're over time. So to address Amit's question on what's India doing to attract investment wanting to diversify supply chains away from China, and the scale question in particular. I think India's has two very big things going for it, and one thing which is a drawback and must be set against that, but which is also an opportunity for Singapore. The two things going for it are very deep and wide, a very deep and wide industrial sector. We have strong, good firms in sector after sector in the country. And if I just think about the number of friends who over these last 5 months have told me stories about how they're getting inquiries from international firms wishing to diversify supply chains away from China. And this is FMCG companies, this is chemical companies. This covers a very wide range of firms. The second thing is that if you decide to then set up an enterprise in India, the ability to hire people in abundance is huge in India. There's simply an availability of skilled people that is not present in any other country. Against that, there are some issues with infrastructure, which is something that we always need to address, but that's also then an opportunity, as we said earlier, for Singapore to participate more actively in Indian infrastructure. Last comment on the India-Singapore relationship is, Hong Kong as a city became rich for 20 years by being the largest foreign investor in China. Hong Kong made it easy for the world to do business in China, and it grew rapidly for 20 years as a result. Is there an opportunity for Singapore to do the same with India?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Naushad. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ong Keng Yong. These are indeed some challenging times and unprecedented times, and we all have been pushed towards digitization, race for vaccines, for the survival of ourselves, race to build an ecosystem that is sustainable, create new opportunities, and explore newer areas of collaboration. As we all very well noted today, India and Singapore are time-tested, all-weather friends and very, very close partners. And our strength really lies in our resiliency, our human talent, our entrepreneurial spirit, our innovative solutions, and our deepening economic and bilateral partnerships. And this was amply clear once again today from all the comments from both India as well as from Singapore. And this particular town hall series will really now continue for 2 months, covering the whole spectrum of India-Singapore partnership. And as I had said earlier, the series will discuss critical issues like the geopolitical issues, economic and commercial partnerships, and collaborations that we have, and opportunities, and chart a path of our mutual growth. And we will give inputs very, very sincerely to our two governments and also to our member companies, to our firms and industries. And at the end of these sessions, we shall compile all of this and see to it that it feeds into these channels. And therefore, this is a very, very critical forum indeed. So stay with us all through this series as we discuss and deliberate on a whole range of topics impacting our two nations, and join us really to find solutions which will help steer us through these very challenging times. So thank you very much for joining us today, and a very, very special thanks once again to Ambassador Ong Keng Yong for all his time and for his continued guidance. And thank you very much, Naushad, too. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.